I met Rachel at a mutual friend's housewarming party about 7 years ago. I remember it so clearly because I almost didn't go. It was one of those weeks where work had drained everything out of me, and I was one text away from canceling. But I showed up, and she was there, talking to a small group, holding a glass of wine, and laughing at something I never heard the punchline to. But I remember thinking she had the kind of laugh that made everyone else laugh too. We started talking near the snacks table. Nothing deep at first, just surface stuff, where we worked, how we knew the host, that kind of thing. But there was something about the way she listened, like she actually cared about the answers. And she had this way of talking that was equal parts sharp and warm. I found myself staying longer than I planned, just to keep the conversation going. We went out for coffee the next week, then dinner, then everything. It wasn't one of those relationships that burns hot and fast. We built it. Steady. Real. We moved in together a year later, and a year after that, we got married. Small wedding, just family and a few close friends. It was perfect. Now we've been married for just over 5 years. We live in a quiet suburb just outside the city in a cozy 2-story house with a big kitchen and a messy office that neither of us ever seemed to finish organizing. I work full-time at a tech company, a position I've been climbing steadily through. I manage operations now, which keeps me busy but comfortable. Rachel works in graphic design, mostly freelance. She has a natural eye for color and layout, and somehow always manages to make time for her work and our life at home. We've got our routines. Coffee together in the mornings, dinner most nights unless one of us is too wiped to cook. Friday evenings we usually watch something together, and Sundays are kind of sacred. Slow mornings, walks through the park, brunch if we feel like getting out. It's not flashy, but it's ours. We've built something good, steady. The kind of life I always hoped I'd have. Rachel has always been supportive, always quick to listen when I needed to vent about work or celebrate a small win. She makes our house feel like home in all the little ways. Fresh flowers in the entryway, music playing in the kitchen, warm lights strung up in the backyard for when we sit out at night. She's creative like that. She just gets what makes a space feel alive. So yeah, at this point in my story, things were stable. Good, even. We were that couple people described as solid. And I was proud of that, because I loved her, and I believed she loved me. Back then, that was more than enough. If someone had asked me a few months ago to describe my life in one word, I probably would have said settled. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I know how that word can sound, like resignation, like giving up adventure for routine. But to me, settled meant grounded. It meant stable. It meant Rachel and I had figured out who we were as individuals and who we were as a team, and we'd built something that felt solid. Our weeks had a rhythm to them. I'd leave early for work, usually around 7:15, just after finishing my first cup of coffee at the kitchen table. Rachel wasn't a morning person, but she'd shuffle into the room with her robe on, hair messy, still half asleep. She'd mumble something like, "Good luck with the fire drills today," or "Remember to bring your lunch," and I'd smile, knowing she wouldn't remember saying any of it by the time she made it to her desk. She worked from home most days, unless she had client meetings downtown. Her freelance gigs were steady, and she'd carved out a good reputation doing social media branding and visual packages for small businesses. Sometimes she'd show me what she was working on, mock-ups, color schemes, logo redesigns. I never really understood all the artistic layers, but she'd light up when she talked about them. That passion always made me proud. Evenings were our time. Rachel usually cooked. She's better at it than I am, hands down, but we took turns when the week got hectic. After dinner, we'd clean up together, maybe put on a show or sit out back with drinks if the weather was nice. On weekends, we'd tackle errands together, groceries, the occasional Home Depot run, trying to finally pick out patio furniture we both liked. We weren't flashy or overly social, but we had a few close friends we'd see regularly. Couples dinners, game nights, small get-togethers. Everyone seemed to agree we were a strong pair. What I appreciated most was that we didn't need to be talking constantly to feel connected. Some nights we'd just be in the same room doing different things. She'd be sketching on her iPad. I'd be answering emails or reading, and there was still a comfort in that shared space. No pressure, just presence. There was trust. I handled the finances, kept an eye on our savings, our bills, our insurance policies. Rachel handled the house, appointments, maintenance, little improvements. She had a list of projects she wanted to do in the guest room and had recently gotten into indoor plants. I think we had 10 by the time I stopped keeping count. We didn't fight much. When we did, it was over stupid things, whether we needed a new rug or who left the milk out. But they passed quickly. We always found our way back to each other, usually with a tired laugh or a mutual eye roll. Looking back now, I think it was that normalcy I held on to most. That feeling that I knew who we were, that we had built something quietly reliable. Because when things are going well, you don't go looking for cracks. You just enjoy the calm. One of the things I've come to realize is that real life rarely feels like a movie. There are no dramatic monologues, no soundtracks to warn you when something's about to change. Most of the time, life just hums along quietly. That's how it was with Rachel and me, calm, steady, deeply lived in. Our friends used to comment on it. How in sync we seemed. How we made everything look effortless. I always took that as a compliment, but also a little funny, because anyone who's been married knows it's not about effortlessness. It's about showing up every day, even when it's boring, even when you're tired. And we did that. For years. We had a little list on the fridge of things we wanted to do together. Some short-term, some long-term. A weekend trip to the mountains. Finally repainting the living room. Visiting Italy for our 10-year anniversary. It wasn't a bucket list exactly, just a running conversation of shared plans. It made me feel like we were always moving forward, even in small ways. We didn't have kids, not yet. We talked about it sometimes, but we weren't in a rush. Our life was full in its own way. Weekday routines, spontaneous date nights, and side jokes that no one else would get. We had our roles. She was better at birthdays and remembering our friends' anniversaries. I was better at fixing things around the house and dealing with insurance claims. One of my favorite parts of our life was Sunday mornings. We'd sleep in a little, then make a slow breakfast together. Pancakes or omelets, depending on who was in charge. Rachel liked to play music while we cooked, usually old indie stuff from college, or a playlist she'd made years ago and kept updating without telling me. It became this quiet tradition. Nothing fancy. Just our time. We knew each other's moods, too. I could tell when she needed space, when a client had annoyed her, or when she was deep in a creative block. She knew when I was stressed from work, when I needed a night in instead of plans with friends. There was comfort in that knowing. In being seen without having to explain everything. Financially, we were doing fine. Between my job at the firm and Rachel's steady stream of clients, we had breathing room. We weren't rich, but we had security. We talked about buying a second car, maybe something fun, a convertible or a Jeep for road trips. That was one of the things we joked about often. One day, when we were those cool, middle-aged people doing spontaneous weekend drives. I never doubted us. Never questioned where we stood. I thought we were partners in every sense of the word. That even if the romance wasn't fireworks every day, there was depth. Trust. Real history holding us together. If someone had asked me back then if I felt lucky, I would have said yes without hesitation. Because I believed I was. It was a Thursday evening, the end of a long week. I had just walked in from work, dropped my bag by the door, and was halfway through kicking off my shoes when Rachel called out from the kitchen. "Hey babe, can we talk about something real quick?" Her tone was light. Casual. I didn't think anything of it. I joined her at the counter. She had her laptop open, one tab showing hotel photos, beachfront, palm trees, bright blue skies. I smiled, thinking she was planning a future getaway for the two of us. So she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, "Katie and Lena are planning a trip to the coast in a few weeks. Just a little 4-day thing. Girls only. No guys, no stress. Just sun, drinks, and sleep." I leaned against the counter, nodding slowly. "That sounds nice. You deserve it." She smiled. "Yeah, I really think I need this. I haven't taken any time for myself in forever. And work's been nuts lately." "I know," I said. "Where are you thinking of going?" "Some resort near the Gulf. Katie found a good deal on a suite. It's not cheap, but worth it." We split the cost. It'd be about $1,200 for my share. I blinked. "That's a bit more than your usual trips, isn't it?" She gave a little laugh. "Yeah, but it's been years since I did anything like this." And I thought, maybe I could use the credit card for it? Just this once. She looked up at me, eyes wide in that way she always used when she wanted something. I didn't even hesitate. I nodded. "Sure. You've got room on the card. Go enjoy yourself." She reached over and touched my hand. "Thank you. Seriously. I just need a little break. Promise I'll bring you back something cheesy." I chuckled. "Just don't forget sunscreen." She grinned and went back to her laptop, humming to herself as she scrolled through resort packages. I left her there and went to take a shower, thinking how good it felt to be able to say yes, to support her, to give her space when she needed it. That's what partners do. That night she was in a brighter mood than I'd seen in a while. She poured us both a glass of wine, made pasta from scratch, played music while we ate. She even lit a candle at the table. I chalked it up to vacation energy, like the idea of escaping, even briefly, had lifted something off her shoulders. I went to bed that night feeling like a good husband. Like I had done the right thing. I didn't know then that there was no girls' trip. That the resort she'd chosen was real, but Katie and Lena weren't going. That Rachel wasn't planning a girls-only escape. She was going with Greg, my boss, the man I reported to every single day. But I didn't know that yet. Not then. The week after Rachel mentioned the trip, things felt different. Not obviously, not enough for me to call it out, but like there was a draft in a room where all the windows looked closed. A subtle, cold shift I couldn't put my finger on. She talked about the upcoming vacation with more excitement than I'd seen in her for a while. That wasn't odd on its own. She always lit up at the thought of travel, but there was a certain glow this time. She ordered new clothes online, dresses, swimsuits, sandals, all arriving in rapid succession. Normally, she'd show me every piece, ask what I thought, spin around in the living room like we were playing dress-up. But this time, everything was kept in bags, quickly carried to the bedroom, tags still dangling. I chalked it up to her wanting to feel good about herself on the trip. She deserved that. But a voice in the back of my head, the one I usually ignore, started whispering questions. Why so many new outfits? Why the sudden secretiveness? Still, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be that guy suspicious, needy. I trusted Rachel. I always had. One night, she stayed up late planning with her friends. She was in the office with the door mostly closed, talking softly on a video call. I walked past once to grab water and heard laughter, hers, high and relaxed, and then a deeper voice on the other end. I froze for half a second. I couldn't make out what was being said, but the voice didn't sound like Katie or Lena. It sounded like a man. But then I heard her say, "Hold on, I think he's up," and suddenly the call ended. When I came back into the room, she smiled at me like nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" she asked, casually. "Yeah," I said, "just thirsty." She nodded, kissed my cheek, and went to brush her teeth. Later that night, lying beside her in bed while she scrolled through her phone, I couldn't stop wondering about that voice. Who had she been talking to? Why got the call so suddenly? I reminded myself it could have been a client. She did freelance work, after all. But something about the way she shifted the topic so fast unsettled me. Still, I kept it to myself. No accusations. No checking her phone. That wasn't who I was. But small things started adding up. She stopped mentioning her friends by name when talking about the trip. No more, "Katie wants to do a spa day," or "Lena found a good brunch spot." Now it was just, "We're thinking of doing this," or "I need to book a ride from the airport." Vague. Distant. She didn't ask me to drop her off or pick her up, either. Just said she'd Uber. I told myself to let it go. Maybe they were coordinating everything separately. Maybe I was just reading into it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this trip, this thing I'd paid for, encouraged, supported, wasn't what she'd made it out to be. And for the first time since we'd been together, I felt like I wasn't part of her plans at all. The weekend before Rachel's trip, something shifted in her energy, not dramatically, not something you'd catch if you weren't paying attention, but it was there. She was smiling more, oddly upbeat, but in a way that felt like she was somewhere else. I'd talked to her about work, about a new system we were implementing at the office, and she'd nod along like she was listening, but her eyes kept drifting to her phone. Every so often, I'd catch her typing something quickly, then locking the screen before I could glance over. She wasn't secretive, exactly, just careful. That kind of careful that makes you feel like there's a conversation happening right next to you, but you're not invited. That Sunday, I offered to help her pack. We used to do that for each other when one of us traveled, tossing clothes into suitcases, laughing about what we forgot last time, making little lists together. It had always been a small ritual. But this time, she waved me off. "I've got it," she said with a quick smile. "You just mess up my system." Her suitcase was already half full when I walked past the bedroom. I only saw it for a moment. Bright dresses I'd never seen before, new shoes still in boxes, a pair of sunglasses that still had the tag attached. It didn't look like a casual girl's trip wardrobe. It looked curated, like she was preparing for someone to see her. I didn't say anything. What was I going to say? Those clothes look suspicious? I shook the thought off, told myself not to spiral. but the feeling stayed with me like a weight pressing on my chest. That night, she stayed up late again. I fell asleep to the sound of her voice in the other room, muffled but animated, as if she were talking to someone who knew her in a different way than I did. When I woke up, the light in the office was off, and she was already in bed, facing the other way. I stared at the ceiling for hours, waiting for sleep that never came. The morning she left, I drove her to the airport. She said she didn't need the ride, had planned to take an Uber, but I insisted. It was one of those small things, something I always did, something I didn't want to let go of. The drive was quiet. She scrolled through her phone most of the time, then looked out the window, humming lightly to herself. When we pulled up to the terminal, she leaned over, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Thank you for letting me go. I really needed this." I watched her walk away, her steps quick and light, her phone already in her hand before she reached the doors. She didn't turn around to wave. Not once. On the drive home, something gnawed at me. Not jealousy, just this slow, cold realization that I wasn't part of her world right now. Not the way I used to be. I'd given her space, given her money, given her trust. But she hadn't taken me with her. Not even in thought. Rachel had only been gone for a day, and already the house felt wrong. I've always thought of quiet as comforting, especially after long days in a noisy office, but this was a different kind of quiet. One that felt too wide, too sharp around the edges. I went about my normal routines, woke up early, brewed my coffee, sat at the kitchen table like I always did. But the empty chair across from me didn't just feel unoccupied, it felt abandoned. I texted her that morning. Just a simple, "Hope you got in okay. Let me know if you need anything." She didn't respond until almost noon. "Yeah, all good. Just relaxing." No heart emoji, no follow-up question. Just a flat sentence. I stared at it for longer than I should have, trying to decide if I was overthinking it. She sent a couple of photos later that afternoon. Beach views, a fruity drink in her hand, sunglasses on, smiling. The kind of picture that's supposed to say, "Everything's fine." But there was something off in her expression. I know her smile. That one was staged. Like it was for someone else. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe she needed space. Maybe I was being insecure for no reason. But that's when Greg, my boss, started acting weird too. We usually had our Monday morning check-ins, just a quick one-on-one to go over numbers and pipeline updates. This time, he canceled. Said something vague about needing to step away from the office for a few days. No explanation. Just disappeared. That wouldn't be so strange on its own, except no one else knew where he went either. His assistant just shrugged and said, "He's traveling, I think. Not sure where." And that was when the thought crossed my mind, just for a second. The kind of thought you immediately try to shake off. What if they're together? It felt ridiculous. Paranoid. Rachel didn't even like Greg. She said he was smug, talked too much, micromanaged. They'd only been in the same room a handful of times, usually at company parties or the occasional dinner when she tagged along. But even then, I remembered how he always gave her compliments that hovered just a second too long. How his eyes lingered. How she laughed at his jokes in a way that felt just slightly performative. Still, I told myself it was coincidence. Greg was a busy guy. Rachel was on a completely unrelated trip with her friends. The world didn't revolve around my anxieties. But by Tuesday evening, she still hadn't called me once. Only a couple of short texts, most of them vague and generic. Having a great time. Weather's perfect. Don't work too hard. I asked if Katie and Lena were having fun too. She didn't answer that one at all. By Wednesday, I had started keeping my phone closer. Not in a panicked way, but in that quiet, obsessive way where you hope it'll light up with something, some proof that you're wrong for feeling uneasy. That your wife is exactly where she says she is. That the man you report to isn't off somewhere else with her. But the silence stretched. And Greg still hadn't returned to the office. By then, the suspicion wasn't just background noise. It had become a constant hum in my mind. And I couldn't turn it off. I was at home when it happened. Thursday evening, just after 8 p.m. I'd made dinner, nothing fancy, just some pasta, and I was sitting on the couch, mindlessly flipping through channels, not really watching anything. The house was too quiet again, the kind of quiet that felt loaded. I'd been checking my phone too often, reading too much into the pauses between texts, the cold distance in Rachel's words. When the video came through, I wasn't expecting anything. Her name popped up on my screen with the familiar message bubble and a simple file attachment, vid_0829.mov. No caption, no preview. I assumed she'd sent me a clip from her trip. Maybe a sunset, Or her and the girls toasting drinks, something casual. I tapped it without thinking. It took less than 5 seconds to understand everything. The video was short, maybe 20 seconds, but every frame of it is burned into my memory. Rachel was in bed, propped up on pillows in a hotel room, holding the phone at an angle that caught most of her face. Her hair was messy, her skin flushed. And then he appeared. Greg, my boss, shirtless, laughing. He leaned in and kissed her neck, and she giggled like a teenager, and whispered, "That was perfect." Her voice was thick with satisfaction. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My body locked up while my mind tried to catch up to what I had just seen. Then, as if some part of her realized what had happened, the video disappeared from the thread. Message unsent. Too late. I had seen everything. There was a solid minute where I just sat there, phone still in my hand, unable to process the storm that had just dropped straight into my living room. My heart wasn't racing, it was dead quiet, like the calm after a bomb goes off and the air is still thick with heat and smoke. My thoughts went wild. Was it meant for him? Had she tried to send him a little memento of their time together, only to hit the wrong name? Or had she just gotten careless, so confident in the lie that she didn't think it could collapse? I sat there in the half-lit room, phone still glowing in my palm, the sound of her laugh still echoing in my head. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I just saved the video to a hidden folder. Quietly, methodically. Then I stared at the wall for what felt like an hour. I thought of all the late nights I spent at work, all the hours I put in to build a life for us. I thought of the mornings we drank coffee together, her kisses on my cheek, the way she said, "Love you," without hesitation. I thought of the trust one gave her freely, stupidly, and how she'd taken it, twisted it, and tossed it into bed with the man who signs my paychecks. She thought I didn't see it, but I did. And now? Now she had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. I laid there in the dark, not out of grief or disbelief anymore, but something sharper, something colder. The truth was out, and with it came a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The pain didn't paralyze me, it focused me. She had her secrets, her games, her lies. I had something better, control. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had changed, smiled at the receptionist, nodded at coworkers, sat down at my desk and logged in like I did every other day. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't a broken man. I was a quiet storm waiting to roll through. I didn't go to HR. I didn't blow up Greg's name in the office. That would have been too easy for him. Too loud. Instead, I started small. I sent a text to the one person I knew had a reason to hate Greg just as much, his wife, Anna. Anna and I had spoken briefly at company parties, small talk, polite smiles. I'd always gotten the sense that she tolerated Greg more than she loved him. I figured she suspected something too. When I texted her and asked if she was free to meet for coffee, she said yes immediately. No questions asked. That afternoon, I showed her the video. Her face didn't change at first. Then her mouth tightened. She didn't ask me if it was real. She just said, "I had a feeling." And then, "Let's ruin them. I'll spare you the step-by-step. But let's just say, one thing led to another." Anna and I saw each other again the next night. And the night after that. What started as shared pain turned quickly into something else. Revenge, sure, but also desire. A strange, unexpected pull that neither of us resisted. We didn't talk about what it meant. Didn't call it anything. But when it happened, it was electric. And I knew I wanted it to hurt Rachel the way she had hurt me. I recorded a short clip of Anna and me. Nothing graphic, just enough. A few seconds. Her voice saying my name. My hand in her hair. I saved it and didn't send it right away. I waited. Then I made the next move. I filed a report with the IRS. It was petty. It was brutal. And it was deserved. I had access to the internal expense sheets Greg had manipulated, the shady side contracts he'd buried. I compiled it all, cross-referenced emails, screenshots, financial inconsistencies. I didn't do it with rage. I did it like I was solving a puzzle. I submitted it anonymously. Then I packed up Rachel's things. All of it. Clothes, makeup, books, jewelry. Thrown into bags and boxes and dropped near the window. One by one, I pitched them outside. Let the neighbors watch. Let them ask questions. I wanted there to be no hiding from it. I took her keys, changed the locks, disconnected her phone line from the house account. And then, when I was done, I finally sent her the video. No caption, no warning, just the same way she had done to me. Her response came within minutes. Calls, messages, all flooding in like a storm she couldn't control. I didn't answer. By the time she got back from her vacation, the locks were changed, the car was gone, her bank cards declined, and her world, just like mine once was suddenly unfamiliar and cold. She knocked on the door. She pleaded. She cried. But I just sat inside, quiet, sipping my coffee, and let the silence answer her. The first morning after it all burned down, the house felt cleaner than it had in years. Not physically. Her scent still clung to the pillows, and I hadn't touched the pile of her things I'd thrown into the garage. But spiritually, it felt lighter. Empty, yes. But empty can be a gift, depending on what filled it before. Rachel was gone. Greg was under investigation. The company was in shambles. I heard whispers in the break room the next week about financial irregularities and executive leave. I kept my head down, pretended to be surprised when the announcements came out. Greg wasn't coming back. No one said his name openly anymore. I guess when the empire starts to rot, the smell gets hard to ignore. As for Rachel, I didn't hear from her after that weekend. The messages stopped. No knocks on the door. No crying voicemails. I think she understood, finally, that she'd burned a bridge she could never cross again. And maybe, in her quieter moments, she realized she hadn't just lost her husband. She'd lost a man who would have given her the world if she'd just asked for it honestly. I took time off work, used up some PTO. I needed space, not just from the house or the job, but from the version of myself I'd been forced to become. A man who doubted everything, who second-guessed kindness, who watched the woman he loved disintegrate into a stranger with every lie she told. I went hiking, rented a cabin for a few days in the mountains. No Wi-Fi, no distractions, just a notebook, a small bottle of scotch, and the kind of silence that doesn't press on you, but wraps you up and says, breathe. When I came back to the city, I knew it was time to move. Not just emotionally, physically. I sold the house, sold the furniture, donated everything that had her imprint on it. Bought a small condo downtown. New walls. New view. Clean slate. That's where I met Lauren. She was my neighbor, lived 2 doors down. We bumped into each other in the hallway, both holding groceries, both laughing at something awkward one of us said. She was different from Rachel in all the ways that mattered. Gentle without being weak. Curious without being invasive. Her kindness wasn't performance. It was quiet, steady, real. We didn't fall into anything quickly. There were walls. On both sides. But over time, she started joining me for coffee, then walks, then dinners on my balcony where we'd talk about everything and nothing. One night, I told her the story. All of it. Not for pity. Just because I didn't want to carry it around like a secret anymore. She listened. Really listened. And when I was done, she didn't offer empty comfort. She just reached across the table, touched my hand, and said, "You didn't deserve any of that. But I'm glad you're still here." And for the first time, I believed that maybe this life, this version of it, could be built from the wreckage. Not as a replacement, but as something entirely new. There's something strange about peace. You don't always realize you've found it until you look around one day and notice what's missing. The tightness in your chest, the knot in your stomach, the constant second-guessing of every word and glance. One morning, you just wake up and there's stillness. Not silence, not emptiness. Just the absence of noise that never belonged to you in the first place. I don't think about Rachel much anymore. When I do, it's more like a slide in a reel I didn't mean to see. A flicker of an old life that no longer fits. She's probably still trying to rebuild. Maybe she's found someone else to orbit. Maybe she's alone. I honestly don't care. That part of my life is sealed now, not out of bitterness, but because it has nothing left to teach me. Greg? His business never recovered. The IRS investigation snowballed into something bigger. I heard through the grapevine he's being audited. Lost investors. Laid off his team. Reputation in tatters. I didn't celebrate. Not really. Watching someone self-destruct doesn't bring joy when you're already free of them. It just confirms that walking away was the right call. Lauren and I are still whatever we are. We don't label it. We don't need to. We enjoy each other. We trust each other. That's enough for now. We go to the farmer's market on Saturdays. We read next to each other in silence. We argue about where to order takeout from. It's simple. It's honest. And best of all, it's mine. Sometimes I walk past my old neighborhood, just to remind myself how far I've come. The street looks the same. Kids still play on the sidewalks. Someone repainted the house, but I don't feel drawn to it. It's like looking at a museum of someone else's memories. I used to think closure meant getting answers, making someone understand what they did to you. But I've learned it's not about them at all. Closure is choosing to stop bleeding from a wound you didn't cause. It's deciding that what they broke doesn't get to define what you build next. So this is me, writing this not as a victim, not as a man betrayed, but as a man who survived it and came out better, not because of what happened, but in spite of it. If you're reading this and you've been through something similar, just know, the fire won't last forever. The silence will stop screaming. One day, you'll pour your coffee, look out the window, and realize you're okay. Maybe even good. That's what this part of the story is. The good part. The one I never thought I'd reach.